Genetic potential, the defining source of an athlete's talent and performance. What is it, and how do we go about understanding it, and ultimately unleashing it? What is the reach, the scope, and the depth of our inherent athletic capacity, and how do we develop it? How far will hard work get us, and how smart does that work have to be? Where are the limits, and what are the limits made of? And what parts are played by strength of character, the power of the mind, and resilience of the spirit? Of these are the essential questions to be asked and answered on the Genetic Potential Show.
Hey, welcome back to GPTV. I'm Kelly Starrett.
I'm Brian McKenzie.
And we have a doozy for you today. We are at the De Anza College pool.
We're at a pool.
We're at a pool. That means one thing, swimming. Obviously, you're not a golfer. This is about, we have head coach for San Jose State, WAC Champions. That's the Western Athletic Conference Champions.
Yes, sir.
We've got some monster swimmers. And really what one of the things we wanted to do with Sage on, I'm gonna get rid of this because it makes me feel unpretty, is that this was a chance for us today to talk about integrating or progressing a strength and conditioning program as it works with a actual sport, because it's easy to sometimes get into the strength and conditioning world where you're like, hey, it really matters how much I power clean, it really matters how much I deadlift, but then you've really got to do the sport on the other side of the day.
Yeah, he's this is somebody who Sage has had the ability to understand how to mesh this whole thing, and he did this early on. And I've known Sage about 4 years now, and they are actually now two-time Western Athletic Conference champion.
Two-time? I only have one. It's my dream, my first championship.
I didn't wear my other one. Just, I'm just kidding. But they for 2 years now are, Western Athletic champions, and he learned early on how to integrate this whole system, and it's produced a hell of a team. But I think the most interesting part, one of the most interesting parts for me, is that there's a letter that goes out each year to the incoming freshmen on what to expect. And I get that letter. I've now gotten that letter for a couple of years now, and it's like, look, here's what you need to be doing prior to getting over here, because you're going to be working your tail off.
Well, and that really, and when we get Sage on, we'll talk about, are we preparing our high school students for the rigors of a good strength and conditioning program?
Yeah.
And this scales up. I have a good friend who's a head strength and conditioning coach for a big pro team, and in NFL, and he says, hey, look, he's got to do all this remedial work, filling in the gaps from kids who are genetically gifted, but don't have good positions, don't have good mechanics. He's got this little amount of time, and they still have to go play a sport. Yeah. And I think it's interesting with CrossFit Endurance, one of the things that I think is sort of lost in the translation about the work you do is that, like, you're saying, hey, here's the skill, you have to be a very skilled athlete, you actually have to go do your sport, but then we have to be able to get into strength and conditioning that doesn't interfere with that. In fact,
absolutely.
And accounting for that, man, that's voodoo.
Absolutely, it is voodoo, and it's a very interesting process that I really can't wait to hear from Sage and the girls, especially the girls, about how they feel like coming in from programs, because all of them came from different programs, things that were not exactly like this, and how all of a sudden, bam, here you are, and you're not only going to be in the pool, but you're actually going to be doing a legitimate strength and conditioning program, where most swimmers are just used to a dry land program that really doesn't focus on a whole lot.
And just to be clear, this strength and conditioning program we're talking about is CrossFit.
Yes.
How do we CrossFit and relate CrossFit back into this bigger piece?
This is that model.
Hey, it's not just strengthening and conditioning. It's CrossFit model as it relates into a high division school, San Jose State, with like monster swimmers and monster athletes. So
I think this is actually a program that you and I would say, this is how we would do it with a team.
I would go so far as to say that this template is the most complete university model for collegiate sports I've ever seen, in terms of the immaculateness of nutrition, about how these girls and these women, let's be honest, manage adaptation, and the seriousness and professionalism of this team. I mean, I think we'll have them address how they manage each other, how they inspire each other, how they were kind of on each other in bad positions, and really how you start to de-bottleneck some of the big processes that are the rate limiters.
That's the whole, but you brought up a good point. It's the whole socialization that starts to occur within the dynamic of this team, where you start to see these leaders just emerge, and like the dynamic of the entire team changes, where they start to care about the way they move, the way they sit, the way they stand, the way they do things, how they're recovering, being responsible for each other.
Yeah.
You know, it's a whole different playing field.
We had one of the San Jose State athletes come and just do a little work at San Francisco CrossFit, and she brought her younger sister in, who's I think is a freshman in high school. And I said, hey, are you going to swim at San Jose State? And she was like, it's a little intimidating. And I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, well, have you ever actually seen them? And I think it was amazing for her to sort of wrap her head around these monsters who are monsters in the pool, and then also, you know, look like monsters and maybe injury-proof monsters, which we'll get to.
Yeah, I mean, look like real women.
Yeah.
Let's just say it.
Female athletes, and really complete athletes.
Female athletes.
This is, I'm really excited to get into it. You know, as we kind of progress, you know, looking at not just spending the genetics of our kids in collegiate programs, because, you know, usually the program is predicated on the fact that there's another freshman who's talented coming in.
Yeah.
Once you're out of the program, are you going to swim? And what we've seen is that people are college swimmers and they stop swimming because their shoulders are destroyed.
This is a lot of sports, though. I mean, in general, it's just like a burnout, spin out type of thing. So, like come in and done.
So how do you know, and the athletes are here still talking about how they're competing, what they're doing, and I'm excited. I think we should probably get into it, yeah?
Yeah, let's get into it.
All right, we'll see you guys in a second.
Okay, guys. You want to get a hold of us, you want to get more involved, here's how you're going to do it. Hit us on Facebook.
Send us your best picture of the worst thing you're seeing during the week.
Twitter, at GP Television.
Hashtag LeopardFail. Hashtag I see more potential. And then, of course, hashtag GPTV.
Welcome back, GPTV. We have got Sage Hopkins from San Jose State University, the women's head swim coach with us. Sage, welcome.
Thank you, great to be
So
here.
glad to have you. So here's what we want to talk about. We want to get into some of the nitty gritty. One is how you've been a swim coach for a long time. You're the head coach of a big collegiate swim program, which means you as head coach get to say, you know, this is your dance space, this is my dance space, this is what we're doing for strength and conditioning, this is what we're doing for nutrition, and what, you know, that double-edged sword is you get to have all of the responsibility and all of the onus. I mean, if you mess this up, it's your job,
And
right?
you get to deal with the parents.
Amazing.
who would like input on things.
How did you get involved with CrossFit?
Probably 5-6 years ago, my assistant at the time, Chris Mitchellmore, he had started doing CrossFit with his former club swim coach, Brian Nevada, coaching out at Arden Hills. And Chris was just immediately hooked, and he started showing me these workouts on his phone, and there's no way our team can do that. At the time, the team was very
That was probably
soft.
true. They probably couldn't do that.
Yes.
The team was very soft in the weight room. I mean, just out of 16 teams on campus, we were 17th team. Girls were scared of the weight room. They were scared of lifting. They didn't want to be there. They were constantly getting hurt. Combination of
Hurt in the weight room?
Yeah.
Or hurt
combination-
in the
in
swim?
the weight room. Combination of they weren't paying attention to what they were doing because they were scared of it, didn't want to be there. The strength coach was just done with them, and he would literally sit in a chair just staring at the ceiling the whole time, probably contemplating a career change. And so Chris started showing me these videos.
Recipe for winning
And,
right there.
That is a recipe.
Hey, I'm here to help you, coach.
I'm here to help.
So Chris, we were down at a swim meet in Bakersfield, and Chris was like, all right, you're coming to the gym with us. You're doing this. And then the first thing we did was Tabata. And I zeroed out on the burpees, hugging a trash can.
Oh, zeroed out. Well, I mean, that's like at least 4 minutes of work.
Yeah.
That's a 400 IM, right?
Yep. And after that, I was hooked. And we started talking to my supervisor at the time and said, you know, I want us to switch over to what we're doing in the weight room and want to start implementing some of this. I think it's really going to work. And a ton of resistance. The guy that at the time was the director of strength and conditioning, the typical CrossFit's dangerous, it's not going to work. I don't want to have it in my gym, and started just fighting the battle. And it was actually Mike Bergner's name that sold it. And my supervisor had a history in Olympic lifting, and I was just giving him some stuff, and he said, wow, Mike Bergner's affiliated with this. It's maybe this guy's it's going to work.
Old man Bergner.
And so, message I got was, you can do CrossFit. There's going to be no CrossFit. Anything that says CrossFit in the weight room, we're not having no affiliation with it. It's not going to work. Your kids are going to get hurt. You're going to get fired, but fine. And
Awesome. Let's do this.
No, go ahead.
yeah. So we started doing it. At that time, it was a perfect transition. Ben Cobian, who's been our strength coach for 7 years now, started with us. And it was just great. Ben fell in love with CrossFit. He's now co-owner of CrossFit Moxie.
This was 3 years ago?
This was 7 years ago.
7 years ago.
7 years ago. And so Ben started, Ben and I both got certified down at the ranch and started doing it with the team, and it just instantly we knew we were on to something. The team loved it, the competitive end of it. They could take the competition they had in the pool and transition that into the weight room, and it made sense to them. The intensity. And so we went through just doing Metcons.
And also there's a sense there where it doesn't feel like I somehow am doing the same thing as these football players. Like, it's different enough sometimes that it gives people a reset where they're not coming into a very formal, like, we are back squatting heavy, we're deadlifting heavy. How does that relate? Suddenly you're like, well, I'm a conditioned athlete. Because I go to a lot of universities and they say strength and conditioning, maybe a little bit light on the strength, some of that stuff, but very light on the conditioning. There's not a lot of conditioning that actually goes on. Yeah. And you suddenly get another tool to get another workout out of your athletes.
Definitely. And so there was literally a group of people that were watching this, just waiting for this huge fail. And so we went through this period where they had just been doing metabolic conditioning. They retested every one of their numbers, squats, deadlifts, presses, everything had just gone through the roof.
Weird.
And that started getting some people's attention, and when you fast forward 5 years, and many of the teams, if not most, were, if not doing CrossFit, heavily CrossFit influenced programming.
Sure. So you start working with Brian 2 years ago. Can you talk about, we came in, we get your athletes early in the season. This last year you brought me in to help and assist. Can you talk about what are the typical problems of a collegiate swim program and how you sort of tried to solve those problems? What if you could categorize as a division, big super division school, solving these set of problems, what are the typical problems of a swim team?
Shoulders. Number one, shoulders. Probably secondary was we had some elbow issues, low back, hip flexor problems, kind of the typical hip flexors are tight, having to use their groin instead of their glutes when they're air squatting, things like that. And traditional thing we were doing before you guys was they were going into the training room and trying to rehab through doing some exercises, strengthening things. Very little emphasis on moving different, more we're going to try to strengthen you.
In my experience, it's not usually a weakness problem. I see very few. I see athletes that aren't very competent in a movement, but it's not because glutes are weak. I mean, they're just in a bad position or don't know how to work.
Yeah, and so remember the first thing you told me when we met last August was there's no excuse for a swimmer to have a shoulder problem. And like, well, and fast forward, you started, you guys were in there working with them, taught them how to move correctly, the smashing, got rid of the douchebag shoulder position, and boom, no more shoulder problems.
Can you say that again? So, this is a sport driven by pulling, and maybe some pushing, but to have and high level. I mean, these girls, some of these women are all Americans. They're all WAC. They're legit, and to come through with very, very low incident of shoulder tweaks that seems miraculous.
It's huge, and they're hitting it very hard in the weight room. They're going overhead a ton.
What? You mean a swimmer whose life is right here is, it's interesting. Of course, being facetious, but one of the things that comes up sometimes, I say is, look, the only thing we should ever be arguing about in terms of position is how, or your condition or your program is how many times a week you need to squat. I don't know. That's your strength coach, that's you. I have some ideas about it. Do I need my football players to be overhead every single day? Probably not. You know, if their life is here, we'll spend competency here. Even if they're doing a lot of hitting, we might not bench press every day or press every day, right? But this is the fundamental position for every swimmer, and building competence here, even if it's about stability or Turkish get-ups or working in these stable positions, that's the money position. And you know, it's so easy to sort of break down these requisite shapes. If your athletes are missing internal rotation, all bets are off.
Yeah, it's horizontal or vertical, that's position's the same either way. And getting up and getting into that position and being able to be in a stable position in that place is huge. I mean, so what's the difference, do you think? What was the main difference? I mean, obviously there's a lot of difference, but from the last 2 years, from what you were doing before to how you're doing it now?
Say,
give us some specifics. People want specifics.
One, they're learning to move better in the weight room. You guys came in, you took them through the Turkish get-ups, and there was an immediate transition in the water in their technique. There were some drills that we had done that were a constant frustration in terms of people not being able to stabilize the shoulder out front. We did the Turkish get-ups the day before, put them in the water, and said, okay, I want you guys to have that same idea of you're stabilizing in this position, but now you're horizontal, grabbing the water out front, boom. People are not moving their hand around to balance anymore. They're anchored, they've got everything stable, they're holding their midline tight, and it was immediately better. So moving differently helped reduce injuries in terms of in the weight room.
And just to jump in here, because sometimes we say, okay, we're doing the strength and conditioning for injury proof, but does it affect how fast your swimmers go?
Definitely. And a lot of it, again, some of the stuff you guys talked about right off the bat was translating how they were moving in the weight room in the water. And it's hard to kind of see how there's going to be that connection from A to B until you actually see it. And, you know, again, one of the first times you were in there, you related their deadlift setup to how they're going to go off the blocks. And, you know, watching you go through it and not really sure, and then 6:30 the next morning, we decided to do some starts, and we related that, you know, set up in that same way for your deadlift, tighten up, get organized, come down, and people went off the blocks, and everybody just popped out of the water and said, oh my God, that was the best start of my life. And then, you know, you guys saw the pictures from WAC, you know, these guys standing up on the blocks, just completely organized before they take their mark.
They look like titans.
Yeah.
It's a little scary. And there's a picture of one of our athletes who's not here, she had to leave, but she is like toes pointed, straight horizontal. I mean, it's the perfect kettlebell swing position, jerk position. It's this like knife position. It's miraculous to see the universality of this. Okay, so you say you start getting in the weight room, you work on positions. What else are the things you talk about?
They're constantly on each other in terms of just calling each other douchebag anytime somebody's like this, or calling each other out.
Sorry, moms.
Jumping in on that too. You know, that I think really has helped, and it's always been this assumption, well, swimmers have bad posture, there's nothing you can do about it, and it's just, well, you can't do it. And you know, you fixed that the very first time you came in and said, you know, what are you guys doing? And you started calling people out. You had Craddock, who had to take off, that got horridly embarrassed when she found out you were throwing her picture up at mobility.
It's not my fault, she was all douchey. So it's interesting, and just as an aside, what we always are trying to connect the dots. Sometimes coaches haven't done a good job of saying, hey, who you are, you're always practicing these fundamental shapes. And if I remember, Craddock was out of the pool because her shoulder was a little wonky.
Yeah.
And she was standing in the worst position ever and just hanging. And I was like, is it her left shoulder? You're like, how'd you know? And I was like, oh, just took a wild shot at it. You know, and I even showed her on that day, you know, and we're not above the metaphorical KAK punch, cock punch, you know, if that's what it takes, you know?
No, absolutely. And I think that's huge. And that was something that you'll notice with all these girls, is that they tend to they were on each other about everything.
And they can coach each other.
They were coaching each other. It wasn't a, you know, like just hammering. It was, you know, just kind of calling each other out.
All right,
and
so
you've
got better positions in the weight room, the things that you think matter, not just, you know, making skilled athletes, right? Not just athletes who can work harder.
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing to bring up, is the fact that you guys were using, deadlift or clean or something like that, and then coming up the next morning, getting on the blocks, and all of a sudden you guys are seeing this translate and understanding how that's implemented. And that is where this really takes a hold of everything, is that understanding of why are we actually in the weight room? Why are we doing this stuff here? And that's helping you understand why you're going to be in here, and you're going to be here, and you're going to be starting in this position, and how you're explosive here, and using all these new positions.
And you know, and everyone's known. You know, we had Mark Allen on. He's like, hey, I knew I had to lift some weights. Right, I need to be stronger. And we're like, all right, well, how much stronger and which weights?
Yeah, and why you're going to be in here, and you're going to be here, and you're going to be starting in this position, and how you're explosive here, and using all these new positions.
And you know, and everyone's known. You know, we had Mark Allen on. He's like, hey, I knew I had to lift some weights. Right, I need to be stronger. And we're like, all right, well, how much stronger and which weights?
Yeah.
Instead of saying, here are the fundamental positions, I'm going to challenge those positions under load, under metabolic duress, under cardiovascular perturbation. And that's my definition of CrossFit, right? That's what we do. And so suddenly you're then able to connect the dots for your athletes so they understand it's not more busy work, it's swimming disguised as movement training, right?
Yeah. Definitely.
So how often you guys, I mean, so you guys are probably what, swimming twice a day?
Yeah, we're 9 times a week in the pool. Doubles Monday, Wednesday, Friday, singles Tuesday, Thursday,
you're
Saturday.
not saying I should substitute my sport with strength and conditioning. Is that what you're telling me? Because that's what people don't understand. They're like, oh, well, you don't need to do your sport. And you're like, no, we need to do a lot of our sport.
Yeah.
So 9 times a week, how long is a typical practice?
It's 2 hours long. We're not swimming that whole time. In the mornings, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, we'd start off with anywhere from a half hour to an hour, or sometimes more of just straight mobility work. And then, which is definitely a pretty big deviation from the model of swimming, to take that much time out of the water doing something that's not getting them in shape. But we found that they were able to work significantly harder in the weight room and the pool, having that mobility time taken out.
Yeah.
And when we're saying mobility, define that for me. Because people are, I want to be clear, people are substituting stretching for mobility, and we're not saying that.
No.
We're saying, can our athletes get into these full positions? And we're going to use this tool to be able to do that, so that they can express that motor control in these positions. Because that people are just throwing around this word mobility, and I'm like, what do you mean? You're saying you can adopt these fundamental shapes. So we got to be able to do that.
Yeah, and what we were doing on those Tuesday, Thursday, Saturdays was a little bit reactive to what they had done in the weight room the day or the days before. I would know what maybe they were going to have a hard time, and we needed to open up their ability to get overhead with lacrosse balls, or we needed to get their internal rotation back, or they had killed their legs and we needed to smash their quads, glutes.
Okay, so we've heard 2 things. One is that how you're using the training. Maybe an hour and a half, 9 times a week. How many times a week are you strength and conditioning?
They're, as a group, in there 3 days a week. With that said, nearly all of them will go on a 4th day a week to either they want to get more work, they're deficient in a certain area, pull-ups, running, whatever it might be, they want to get extra work in there. And there's several that went in a 5th day a week. There were some that would try to go in a 6th day a week that we would usually start chasing them out of there.
So we're looking at the very minimum 12 to 15 workouts a week.
Correct.
Okay. So how did you support all that? Because I think that there's one missing piece in here, and that is nutrition.
Yeah, nutrition and recovery, huge. We've got Sherry Keener, who's our team nutritionist off the CFE staff, and she's just been great. She comes in, she starts off with a group lecture to the team, and before Sherry, typical swimmer would get up. We've got 6:30 a.m. practicing on a Monday. Wouldn't eat anything. Would go to practice. Maybe grab a bagel after practice.
Healthy.
Would go to class.
Need some carbs.
Sweet.
Would go to class all day. Maybe grab a balance bar. Go to afternoon practice in the water for a couple hours, and run down to the weight room. Get out of the weight room. It's maybe 5.
Starving Athletes Foundation. And
she had only had 400 calories that whole day, a bagel and maybe a balance bar. And that was very typical.
Your face is just like...
It depends.
Wait,
I'm like, I don't even go with this.
Wait,
I mean, how much cream cheese is on that? That's all I can think of,
Yeah.
But all right, okay. So can you talk specifics about
problems?
I don't feel so good,
This is a very typical thing.
I feel all weepy. Can you talk about what specific nutrition interventions? Is it just about eating more?
Eating more frequently, I would say, and then trying to include what Sherry, in an ideal situation, they're getting a protein, a carb, and a fat. The protein's animal-based, the fats, nut, seed, coconut, avocado, something like that. and the carb is vegetable based. And that's an ideal situation. You know, very paleo-ish. They're in college. It's going to be very difficult for them to eat totally clean paleo, but along that spectrum, and then trying to balance protein, fat, carb as best they can, and then doing that every 2-3 hours in an ideal situation.
Amazing.
And amazingly, the ones that adopted that swam the best, improved the best.
Strange.
The bottlenecks. Well, and you know, and I think what it is that issue is we know you can buffer bad diet for decades. We know you can be in bad positions for decades. But suddenly when you start to clean those things up and really pay attention, especially, I mean, there's no one, I have to say honestly, I've never seen a team work as hard as your team. I mean, professional athletes don't work as hard or as immaculate as the women that you work with. So,
yeah, and it was huge. And then, you know, outside of that, we've got all the mobility stuff, voodoo banding. We've got the contract with Skins, and they're in Skins tops and bottoms after they're in the weight room, sleeping in them, if not, you know,
traveling in them.
Several hours traveling the Skins. The Skins have been huge for us.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
What do you feel like you were able to improve the program again from 2 years ago to this year's WAC? I mean, has San Jose State ever been Western Athletic Conference champions?
No. Last year, the 2012 season was the first year. We won it again this year, 2013.
Is that pretty unusual?
Yeah, we had been third once. Outside of that, fourth was the top we had ever been. When I started at San Jose State, I think they had never been better than sixth at the conference championship. So we climbed up, and we were generally fourth, third one year, usually fourth. We started working with you guys.
Let's talk about a couple things that I think sometimes are lost as the head coach. Do you CrossFit?
Yes.
How do you eat?
Very clean.
Weird. So yeah, and that really does matter. I think you don't have to be the fastest, you don't have to be the strongest, but you know, are you doing what you say is good for your athletes?
Yeah.
You know?
I think that's a huge part of it. Absolutely. Yeah.
What else? So we have a whole bunch of coaches listening who are working with athletes, but we're on the strength and conditioning side. I may not be the head swim coach side. Give us some advice. Give me like 3 or 4 points that you're thinking, this is what I've learned working at the top end of collegiate sports into I can help strength and conditioning coaches out there make sense of preparing athletes for me. What would you tell them?
So you've got to, if you're a strength and conditioning coach, you've got to have a great relationship with the swimming coach in terms of communication. If you're the swimming coach, you've got to have a great relationship with your strength and conditioning.
In what way? Can you say?
A lot of communication. Ben Kobe and I talk daily, if not several times a day. And one of the things that we had a hard time with when we first started implementing CrossFit is he would kill their legs, and then I would expect them to be able to do a great kicking set, 12 hours later, and that just wasn't going to happen. And so we have to communicate a lot, and it may be a situation where I say, hey Ben, I need them a little bit sharper here, or we're having this issue I want to be able to address.
So it's not that you're just laying out, also you're making decisions on the fly. You're actually coaching volume on the fly based on the data that you're seeing.
Definitely.
Which is one of the things that I think is a mistake out in the world right now is that, I'm driving off my numbers, I got my numbers set up for 8 weeks, and my athletes are augering in, and I'm not adjusting that volume appropriately.
Definitely, and there's very good coaches, very good programs. A good friend of mine who is one of the top coaches in the world shared his season plan for next year, and he has it down to how many yards his swimmers are going to swim every week, mapped out a year ahead of time, and that's the plan. And you look at that and you're wondering about variables. What if they're doing better than you thought, worse than you thought? And the coach that I swam for in college had that same just adamant inflexibility in that was the practice that was written in come hell or high water. That's the programming that was going to go, whether it was working or not.
I think Louis Simmons said 30 years ago the Russians figured out that model didn't work. I don't know. I'm just kind of paraphrasing.
Well, and even it's PR for the day, and what are we doing? I mean, bring it back to Coach Bergner. He says, when the frying pan is hot, let's cook.
Yeah.
And sometimes we're going well, and we can handle more volume. We get another session in. Okay, so the first is have a conversation with the sport coach and athlete that you're talking about. What another kind of pearl?
Understand just human movement, and that's one of the biggest things you guys have brought to my attention is there's definitely, as a coach in a technique-driven sport, be it running, swimming, whatever, you obviously understand human movement, but looking at it in terms of internal rotation and what that can do to an overhead athlete, looking in terms of implementing stuff where you're having them do hollow rocks and then put him in the pool and hold that same position. But really understanding how all of that stuff is going to dovetail together. And that's been, definitely we've looked at technique from a different standpoint, just in terms of, internal rotation is just huge, and seeing, people at the end of the races when they get fatigued deviate to, what kind of is the old norm, but still pretty ingrained in them, through training, through bad posture, things like that.
And yeah, understanding that just poor posture itself is going to lead to something in the pool.
Definitely.
Well, that's right. And you always say we're going to find out who we are no matter what.
No matter what. It's going to happen.
And I think one of the smart things that's sort of missed about integrating a good strength and conditioning program, you've got the nutrition piece and you're getting athletes to sleep more, but one of the things is, how do we break habits? Because, let's be honest, you inherit these women from high school who are not perfect. They have a lot of bad habits. You have to break those habits. You have to reteach. And then how do you do that? And we think that the weight room is one of those places to drive new motor patterns and clean up motor patterns while we make changes in the pool. So I don't have to stop swimming, do the reminiscence effect, let everything drop for a year, or take 6 months off and then rebuild my swing. I can start to integrate these changes because all I'm doing is this deep practice in the strength and conditioning CrossFit environment piece.
Definitely. And the first practice you came out, and you guys just came out and watched practice, and I had no idea what you guys were looking for really at that point.
What do they want? What are they going to do? We're just watching.
You came up and said, would I be correct in assuming it's very difficult, if not impossible, to make meaningful technique changes at this level that stick when they get tired, when it's under pressure? And yeah, you're right. You can make these changes, but at the end of the race, at the end of a workout, they're deviating back to that bad technique. You said, yeah, I found the same thing, whether it's NFL, Major League pitchers, Navy SEALs, whomever, you can make those changes in the weight room of how they work, and it transfers into the water, and we've definitely seen that. I know Marisa and I, she's going to come up soon, we're just talking about, a technique issue, and, I was watching her, there was this problem she was having in terms of her stroke, and I said, hey, I'm not going to tell you what I'm thinking or what I'm seeing. I want you to do this, and let's see if it fixes it. And, we opened up her internal rotation, and this technique problem she had been having vanished.
Bam. All right,
Black
so
magic.
Last thoughts. What are you going to change for next year? Can you tell your secrets?
There's always some secrets. We feel like, one of the things that we need to do is just constantly learn more, and we finished the year understanding how to integrate the mobility into the program much better than we started the year. Every year we get better on the strength and conditioning end in the weight room, we get better in the pool. We've got a great group of freshmen coming in that we're very excited about. We've got challenges ahead with college student athletes, get them to eat clean, get them to rest, get them to buy in.
These girls sleep a ton. They never party. That just doesn't happen. They're all straight A students.
Straight A.
In bed at 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
It's no problem.
Yeah.
Well, Sage, let's get you some of your athletes on and talk about some of the nitty gritty and how they solve it and the change they had as athletes.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Hang tough. We'll see you guys in a minute. Welcome back, GPTV. We are pleased to have Sage Hopkins, head strength and conditioning coach, swim coach for San Jose State, and a couple of his graduating swimmers. That's why we can have them on the show. Doesn't violate any NCAA rules. Can you introduce your athletes for us?
Definitely. To my right, we have Kiley Foster. And to my left, Marisa DeWames. They're both sprint freestylers. We're sprint freestylers. They recently retired.
You can't quit that.
They're still pretty quick. And both came to us as swimmers that were overlooked by most of the teams that they wanted to have them be recruited by.
Underdogs.
Where did you guys want to swim in college?
I looked at Texas A&M, Cal Poly, San Diego State, and UCSB, and I remember specifically going to Cal Poly and having the coach just flat out say, we don't accept anyone less than an Olympic trial time, and you're not fast enough, like we're not even going to look at you.
Oh.
So it was definitely kind of rough looking for colleges to take me in, considering the fact that I had minimal experience, but Sage was the only one that was able to kind of look past the fact that I didn't have much experience and kind of see the potential that was there. So
Did you, before we jump, Kylie, did you know anything about the kind of program that he was going to run?
I had never even heard of CrossFit until I spoke with him about it, and even then I was still kind of like confused on what it was because we only spoke over the phone, and prior to college I had never lifted a weight in my life.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to Westlake High School down in Southern California, Ventura County, and I was part of a club team down there, and the traditional dry land that we would do would just be, you know, okay, we're gonna do some
bands.
do some sit-ups, here's some bands, let's run a few laps around this, you know, the school, and then get in the water and work. So when I came on my recruiting trip and I watched a weight session, I think they did Tabata. I'm pretty sure that's the one that you guys did. And I remember just sitting there, just kind of like, what is this? Like watching the girls get after it and watching Ben just show no mercy and just kind of just drill them into the ground. And that was kind of for me the moment when I was like, this is where I need to go if I'm going to get better. So it was, because I mean, San Diego State was a lot more, they tried to recruit me too. So it was kind of between the two schools. And I mean, the program here, I could definitely see that it was progressive, and that was what I was trying to be a part of. So
Yeah.
And for some context, can you talk about, just real quick before we'll switch over, your end up success with the school? Do you have any pool records, any school records, anything like that? Any WAC champ, like athlete of the week, anything like that?
I don't know where to start.
Start at the beginning.
7 school records, I believe. 2 WAC championships, obviously. I qualified for Olympic trials in 2 events, and that was something that I'd been thinking and dreaming of doing ever since, you know, I started swimming. And what else? I'm trying to think.
Perfect. I just wanted to kind of just give your bona fides out there. Just say that, you know.
Oh, and once we actually started working with these 2, I was finally able to not only make the podium in my main events at WAC, but actually medal in them and get gold in them. So that was a really big deal. And this year specifically in the 200 free, I'd never medaled in that, and that I was able to come back with a silver in that. So that was a big deal for me.
That's what's up. That's what's up. Legit,
Love that.
legit.
Love that.
Can you talk about your experience? Where'd you go from? How'd you find Sage?
Yeah, mine's kind of similar. I really want to go to Santa Barbara, but they told me that my technique and my form was horrible. They wouldn't even look at me. Sage was the only coach that actually told me he can fix what was wrong with me. So I kind of went with him. And he tried, he did his best. So yeah, Santa Barbara was my main school, and I was really defeated because I came from being the top one at my school to being totally shut down, like, oh, you're not fast enough, you're not good enough. So when I met Sage and he told me, hey, I can change you, I can make you faster, I was like, oh, okay.
You know, Jeff Martin of CrossFit Kids, he basically would lurk outside the kids who didn't make the football team. And he'd be like, just come train with us, just hang out. And like, you just collected these monsters and then just turn them back in next year, and you know, and these kids would all win spots. It's interesting how this, there's something to that, you know, that notion. Like maybe it's part of the recipe for how you choose hungry athletes, huh?
And Kylie, where'd you come from? What kind of a background in swimming?
I didn't start swimming until high school.
Yeah.
I started at the end of my freshman year because I did water polo first.
This seemed fun. Like, it's the hardest, gnarliest sport there is.
I loved it. I wasn't good enough to play in college. But I went to school in Alta Loma in Rancho Cucamonga, Southern California.
Yes.
Kiley swam, made Olympic trials herself. You know, she definitely improved immensely. It's nice when you'd run into those coaches, the Cal Poly or Santa Barbara that these two weren't fast enough for you to go to that were faster than anybody on either of those teams.
And did you, in the school, do you have any school records, anything like that?
Yeah, like Sage said, I'm in Olympic trials. I anchored a lot of our relays that have records now. I don't remember my individual record.
That's okay. Just the idea is that
yeah.
you have two slides. Now, you guys have, you came through, were products of the system for 4 years. So did you swim together for 4 years? Yeah. Not 5 years, 4 years?
Yeah.
So can you talk about the changes and what you experienced as collegiate athletes that really ended up making the difference? Because at some point, you weren't just Sage's athlete, you guys started having really intense conversations about solving problems. Ended up being much more collaboration than just, I'm the head coach, you do what I say. You guys talk about that evolution?
Well, when I first got here, my freshman year, it's just a totally different team than when I got here. I think that I got here right before the real progress started, and seeing how not only just the way the team worked with each other, but how they worked with the coaches evolved was just really interesting. That when you typically have a coach, like you said, it's, do this, you do this, you do that. And the Sage, it was a dialogue. You were able to say how you were feeling, how certain things were going for you, and adapt the training to you specifically. And so that was, I think, on my end, how I was able to definitely get as good as I was able to get. So I don't know about.
Yeah, I definitely had to start my communication off at the beginning because I couldn't make any of the sets for the first 4 months. I had CrossFit. I started CrossFit this summer going in, and so that was kind of where I excelled. I didn't excel so much in the pool. So I definitely did a lot of communicating with Sage on how to get better in the pool, how to actually make sets, how to not die in a practice. So it kind of started off early, but it definitely kept growing.
And that's kind of that's something typically that does happen with a lot of swimmers that either come over from existing programs in schools or have come from high schools or even programs that aren't typically doing the intense work that you even do in the warm-up, and where we start to see these, kids who can't even make sets, with a lot of these things.
Definitely. We had a swimmer transfer in this past year and redshirted, and the program she came from was very volume-based, very distance-oriented, and she was just destroyed for the first 2/3 of our season. They had a very difficult time handling the intensity of our warm-ups, let alone the workouts, and she just wasn't used to that type of intensity. She was a sprinter that came from a program where they didn't sprint until January, and they'd be in the water September until January without sprinting as a sprinter. And we're sprinting the first practice. They're going hard during warm-ups, and it, like you mentioned, it exposed every one of her weaknesses, and then we were able to fix those problems. And all of a sudden now things are clicking. She's really just killing it.
I think that's a good point that you brought up. And Kelly was mentioning this earlier, is the fact that you can't really hide from who you are, especially with a program like this, and which is why I've taken so much, and why we've just grabbed this thing, is because look, we can expose what's going on real quick, and we can literally get to work at making you better now. It's not necessarily just fix, we're going to start making you better, we're going to start making you a better athlete. And I think, both of these girls are testaments of it. And I don't know if the camera is showing this, but, one of my favorite things of hearing is about how when these ladies walk onto a pool deck and the looks they get from other teams. And it's like, what just walked onto the pool deck? And
Cyborgs.
Cyborgs. And they are. They're just built machines that are awesome. And it's an amazing thing to see.
And this is, I think, one of the interesting things about this conversation about sort of the strength and conditioning piece. We use CrossFit. We try to eat as clean as we can, but we never talked about swimming technique at all. I know you obviously are a great swimmer with a swimming background, but I
don't need to. What's the point? There's a head coach who's dealing with that.
How can we clean up and create a ready state so the athlete understands the direction from the coach? I think that's really where, what's so nice is I don't think I ever got into a conversation about how you should teach, how you should, whatever, the techniques are driven, and really letting you guys experience that here's what we think are the best positions and shapes. Now go express that, and you're never at odds, which is, I think, how this works so well.
Yeah, absolutely.
The transfer over, about it before with the dives. I mean, I've always felt like I was fairly strong, and you know, I know my dad. My dad would always give me a really hard time throughout college whenever I would go and I'd dive, and he'd say, "You've got like such powerful legs, and when you dive, it just looks like you're not going anywhere." And he's like, "Get after it." And I would just sit there and be like, "I'm trying. I don't know what."
No, try harder.
No, I'm pushing. I don't know how much harder one can push. And after we did the deadlift setup and we applied that to our dives, like Sage said that morning, you know, we got all set up like we did with the deadlifts, and going off the block just felt it clicked, and it was just the most powerful dive that I had ever had. And ever since then, all meets. I mean, I used to do the hang over the block, you know, just climb up like a little gremlin and get down, and
just a meat hanger.
Yeah, exactly. And so that change just made it all different.
Well, and also that you did the same thing every single time. There wasn't a lot of variability, which is what, you know, demystifying the setup, you know?
You know, and just so you guys know, if you've never seen like real, like swimmers get ready on the blocks, what it was like is if you've ever seen powerlifters, like before they actually deadlift and set up, like literally these girls were getting on the blocks and they were just setting everything up and organizing before they would race. And it's a fairly intimidating thing.
Well, and this, you know, and this is where we want really drive the connections for people, and making the connections so you understood. And I think we had these conversations about how do we do these same thing every single time so it becomes unconscious. So in the final race, when you're stressed out, you're not having to think about doing the same thing every time. Because what we had done was I asked you guys to set up, and I asked you guys to set up again, and I asked you guys to set, and we had 38 athletes, and 38 different setups, and then another 38 different setups, and another, you know, and I was like, tell me about your process. And they're like, I just bend down, grip it and rip it, you know, and I'm like, whoa, and you're just bringing that. And then what's great is I think you guys connected the dots so well on some of these things. Can you talk about specifically like what things worked for you that maybe you think were unique in the strength and conditioning program that allowed you to excel as an athlete? Specifically, like give the people listening specific details. Like
People want to know, Kiley.
Like how many macadamia nuts, like whatever it took to get you to kind of survive and go.
Like nutrition-wise?
Whatever, anything, whatever.
Strength-wise, Sage will tell you I couldn't streamline. I never got my hands over my head, so working a lot with overhead mobility. I know you worked on my shoulder mobility. I always had tendonitis in both my elbows, so I was always out halfway through the season. And you really came in and showed me that, hey, it's not your your elbow, it's your shoulder. Because you have no mobility in your shoulder at all, and this whole time I was thinking, oh, it's just my elbow.
Stupid elbows.
Came in and fixed that, and that made a huge difference for me. I voodoo band my elbows all the time, got mobility back in my shoulders, and since then I didn't have very many problems at all this past year.
What other things that you think made you successful last year?
The nutrition, definitely.
Like, give us some specifics. Like, what does that mean? Did you eat a lot?
Yes, I ate a lot, but I ate a lot of, we would bake every weekend. I would go to Taco Bell, Del Taco, any fast food restaurants with my roommates. Just things that were easy to cook when I didn't want to cook. Ate a lot of like lean pockets, those kind of things. It said lean on it, so I was thinking, you know. But you guys kind of came in and switched that and gave us healthier options. Ways to satisfy like sweet cravings.
Yeah, because you didn't know, right?
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
No, we're saying, you know,
this
is before.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is
And
before,
then-
not now.
Yeah,
Not now.
Lean. What's this paleo pocket? What?
What? Why are you looking at me like that? You said to be honest.
It's got grass-fed pastry dough.
Exactly. No, you guys came in and showed us that like if we wanted something sweet, we could make a chocolate protein powder shake instead of going and getting like a gallon of ice cream a meal and everything.
Well, Sherry
eating more,
specifically
yeah.
came in and worked with you guys and did a lot.
Yeah, and I think that definitely helped. I definitely felt a lot better in the water. I didn't feel as slow. I didn't feel as tired. I wasn't getting like sugar highs. I wasn't getting like insulin spikes as much. That way I wasn't crashing as much either.
Yeah.
Our
That's great.
post-race nutrition, maybe something to touch on. You know,
What,
before you want to
yeah,
come to that?
get in there.
Yeah, I was going to say you're going to steal what I was going to say.
Whoa. Whoa.
I don't even know where to begin. Well,
So much for-
we used to what?
Nothing. What am I going to say? I know what I'm going to say. Go ahead.
Well, what we used to do after races and meets, you know, you'd have like the Boost shake, those like little chocolate milk things, and I mean that was recovery, whatever. I didn't actually really feel that much better after I would drink that type of stuff, and this year we started doing beef jerky, macadamia nuts, right after you're done with your last race, like as you're warming down.
Real food.
Yeah, so like as I'm swimming, I'm like
Interesting.
munching on beef jerky, and you can imagine the looks we got there. But I'm like doing backstroke with jerky hanging out of my mouth. And,
It's intimidation, start to finish.
Start to finish.
MD, I love
Intimidation.
and so, I mean, that in itself, I could tell was making a huge difference. And you know, I started to try and get really into the clean eating my junior year, and that was before we had Sherry. And, you know, that was mostly because we had a girl on our team that was gluten-free, and Sage had started to tell us about how beneficial it could be for you. And, you know, my junior year was a phenomenal year, and that was the year I started eating a lot healthier. And when Sherry came in and she started implementing the protein, the carb, the fat, and, you know, eating throughout the day and stuff, and that was, you know, you could tell that the recovery and the performance that increased tenfold. I mean, it was just ridiculous. And then specifically to pick a bone with you, I'm looking at you, Starrett. The first time I met you and you made me cry because you smashed my shoulder the first time. And like you were saying before, as a swimmer, one of the most important things is your shoulders. And so from a young age, you're taught, protect the shoulders, don't do anything. You know, when you look at someone smashing a shoulder, it's intimidating, it's scary. And I'll never forget that, you know, while you were doing it, I was like, I'm done. Like, my swimming career is done. This guy's ripping off my arm. And I went and I swam.
That's why I'm Dr. Kiley Starrett.
Yes.
And I went and I swam the next day, and it was the best my shoulder had felt in such a long time. I mean, it was just night and day.
And you were such a crybaby before.
You sent me actually pictures of you guys, you know, tweaking yourselves, jumping off the bus, undoing the bus, and really you started to manage. Like you didn't need Sage to direct you. You knew where you were tight. You know, whatever was the missing piece, you really took that on. We don't empower our athletes to even be able to do the basic maintenance on themselves. You guys, sometimes it's shocking how stiff you are.
Yeah.
And the first time you're like, wow, I really am not eating right. My positions do suck. You know, you're working. We just see it like I would describe you. I was like, you're like a Ford F-150 stuck in third gear, handbrake on, one of the wheels kicked right.
Yeah.
I was like, you were still fast, but you know, what happens when we start
Going in a
those things
circle.
off? It's cool. It's cool.
Yeah.
Amazing. What else has made a difference for you guys?
I'd say for me personally, or as a team?
You personally for the team.
I've always had ankle issues. I sprained it a few times back in the day, and it was
Tell them how you sprained your ankle.
chasing a bear.
Duh. Wait, can you just talk for a second about the last thing that just happened? You got in trouble with your dad for doing what?
For what?
Your dad just talked to you about doing what?
For diving?
No, for ripping the
Door handle?
Oh, I got in trouble because I ripped off a handle on a door in our house.
Is this the first time? Again.
This is the
Okay, so just setting the
this is
stage for
fourth
this,
or
right?
Fifth time I've done that. I get excited.
Oh, God! Oh, stupid.
No, but so when you came to the pool deck with your daughter one day, and I was on kicking sets, I mean, the power was there, and I would always tell Sage, you know, my legs aren't even tired yet. My ankle is just not moving. And you came and you worked on it, and I remember jumping in the water, and I don't even think I did the set because I was too busy underwater just feeling it kick and how it felt like I had a brand new ankle. And I mean, that was just another specific thing that I can remember that was really changing for me. And I don't know what you
So, I'm sorry, my daughters are swimmers, right? They're both, Georgia just started water polo, both are on the swim team. Some high school athletes, a lot of parents will watch this, show them their daughters, especially their high school daughters. What advice do you have from the end of like championship school, like really, really as good, illustrious swimming careers as you can have, uninjured? What advice do you have for these young female athletes coming through?
What advice do I have for the
Yeah, I mean, like, you know.
Just, I think that a lot of people don't address issues until they're there, and I think that with the mobility and the smashing and everything, it's so preventative, and people don't really think about fixing things before they happen. And you know, the shoulder, like Sage said before, you know, with the shoulder injury that I was dealing with, every time I'd come on with the recovery, my stroke, I'd get stuck. And before NC2As last year, we sat hours and hours, you know, Marisa, do this, you need to do this, and I would just come out and be like, I'm trying, my arm is not physically doing it. And when he had me get out of the water and he smashed me and had me go back in the water and it was perfectly fine again, I mean, I wasn't even trying, and it was exactly what we had been working on, and that was a really big deal. But I think people definitely need to look into taking care of things before.
Did you guys have a, like, before sort of Sage, pre-Sage, did you look at any of this?
No.
We just swam you. You warmed up, warmed down, got out of the pool.
Yeah.
Didn't even ice. I didn't. Came to practice.
That was actually great. Good job on that one.
Well, I don't ice anymore, actually. Well, now there we go again. The voodoo bands, you know, we used to ice a lot, do all the ice baths, and then with the voodoo bands, that's just a whole nother.
It's like we don't need it.
Yeah, you definitely, it's so much better.
What advice do you have?
I would kind of go off what Marisa said and definitely do preventative care. I'd also say nutrition, like coming in with no nutrition background or eating like horribly. Nutrition was one of the things that really helped me and really helped me become stronger. And it wasn't more of like a weight loss thing or a weight issue. It was more of getting lean and being able to use the muscle that I had because my body was always so tired or so like going up and down with insulin spikes, and I just always felt fatigued with the way I ate. And now the way I eat, I feel so much stronger with myself.
And even looking at training volume, you're always talking about this. Like, are you managing these pieces so that you can do enough training? Because it starts to accumulate. You work 10% harder than me this week because you're eating better. That over 10 weeks, that's a lot.
Yeah, you just can't. You got to be able to. Once you miss it, you're not going to catch it. It's over.
Yeah.
So that's a great point.
And I feel like so many people are like, oh, I'm an athlete, I can eat whatever I want.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's the case. I think that's a complete myth.
Yeah.
I would say
athlete.
swimmers as a group just culturally have horrendously bad nutrition.
Well, yeah, I mean, as a kid, what I remember going to swim meets, and it was like donut setup. Like that was what was set up,
I did a burrito on
donuts,
the blocks.
and you know, ready to go. And that's
Here, Mom,
where
hold
you would
this.
go get snacks, and you'd just crush donuts and things. Which maybe that's why I still have a donut problem. No, I'm just kidding. I'd like you guys to talk about just a little bit, maybe about like the team dynamic and like how you guys, like this, what happened on the team and like the overall sense of everything.
The intensity increased so much, and one of my favorite things that I like to tell people is how before you guys came in, or specifically this year with the mobility work and the smashing, I mean, after the days that we would have 3 workouts in one day, we'd all just, if we were hanging out, would just sit down and just stare at a wall and do nothing proactive. And then we would start having smashing parties, where it would be like smashing party at my place, and like 10 girls, 5 to 10 girls would show up.
That's already taken. Smash Party. You can go to smashparty.com.
Smash party. Yeah, and we'd all show up and we'd kick on the TV and sit there and do quad smash, and we'd take turns, and that was how we spent, our Friday nights. It just changed so much.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Even just the differences of when we came early, few lectures, few sessions, and the next time you guys are sitting upright, managing, like you were
totally
different.
People slouching down during team meetings, you'd see someone all hunched over, and the person next to them would be like, and they'd be like, sit up straight. It was just it wasn't controlling each other, it was, coaching each other and helping each other be better, and knowing that you were accountable not just to your coaches who aren't with you 24/7, but to the people, your teammates that you spend so much time with.
Can you just, we're going long, but can you talk about the strength and conditioning aspect of this? We know the nutrition makes a difference, the adaptation, some of those positional stuff. Can you talk specifically about your experience with CrossFit and how that affected your capacity, or what you liked about it, or how that made you a better swimmer?
Well, personally, I always go back to a memory that I had last year when I was swimming my 100 free at WAC in finals. It was second to last out of 9, I think, events. How many events? So many events that I swim over 3 of a week. And I was on the last lap, and I honestly didn't think that I was going to keep going. And I thought to myself, you did fight gone bad, Marisa, you can do this. And I just took off. And it's not even just the fact that it gives you the strength and the power to hold on, but the mental power that you get from it is incredible. I mean, if you can do, the hell CrossFits that we did at the beginning of the year, you can do anything.
Fight gone bad, 100-meter race.
Right? Yeah.
I think I'd choose Fight Gone Bad.
Yeah.
Let me be honest, it's so bad, So what about you?
Yeah, I mean, the strength part of CrossFit really challenged me. Like Sage said, I have a really hard time with streamlining and getting off the wall. I don't even think I made it to the flags at most points. Yeah. And so being able to like learn how to deadlift correctly and squat correctly and build that strength in my legs, it was the same movements off the wall that it was on dry land. And so to be able to incorporate that, I was able to actually make it to the flags by the end of my senior year. So it's kind of a goal.
You're talking about the flags on the other side of the pool. Oh, right.
Yeah, those ones.
Well, you guys, thank you. So anything, last words, last piece of advice, things you're just dying to say? This is what you guys are doing, I think, is one of the most cutting edge programs. You know, thank you so much for being on. You know, any last ideas about integrating all this? Sage.
First, I would just say huge thank you to both you guys, Sherry Keeter, Ben Cobian, but especially you guys have really helped change effectively, in an amazing way, the team dynamic. The unscared model the team has, the way that they're coaching each other.
How many girls have that tattooed on them now?
At least 4.
A couple
Five,
more
yeah.
alumni have it.
Alumni have it now too.
I think it might be up around 6 or 7 now. But the whole culture of the team is just, CrossFit has been a huge part of our team culture. What you guys have brought to the table has been a huge part of the team culture. And like I shared with you guys, we won the WAC Championships this year with a team that wasn't quite as strong as the team we won the year before. And a lot of that was the improvements that you guys helped with.
Yeah.
Right on.
Thanks. I just wanted to say, it's an amazing thing to watch not only a coach who can actually communicate with his staff, because Pete and everybody else who's involved on the staff was very open to this whole thing. Ben has been amazing, and the fact that like Kelly and I came in and we're just like, hey, here's what we would like to do. We don't want to interfere with what Ben does. We don't want to interfere with what you do, and that you can create that environment. And then you've got ladies who are willing to step up and see something, who I really think saw an opportunity in the fact that something was changing. And there's something very different that was going on here. And now, arguably, we'll probably see a lot of people try and chase this thing, from other team standpoints. And, I think that's a huge thing. And to be a part of that and to be able to not only graduate, but move on in your life and take something like what you just did is a very big recipe for success. So, I found it nothing but just a joy to be a part of this and help out in the way that I can. So, my thanks go to you guys for helping with that whole thing.
And for my first college championship ring. Oh, do you have yours on? Oh, do you have yours? Okay. All right.
We have ours on.
That's all right. Hey, GPTV, thank you guys so much. We'll be back in a second. And we're back from GPTV. I'm Kelly Starrett. This has been Brian McKenzie. Amazing show. Brilliant athletes. Good coaching. But really, it looks like art. It looks like alchemy. But on the other hand, simple. What are the bottlenecks? How do you integrate a system? I mean, we were just talking, it's impossible to be a coach these days and not understand the big view, and really put your energy into those things.
Be able to reach out and do that, and have people who you use and are communicating with on a regular basis. It's not just like the football coach who gets the strength staff anymore. We've now got a swimming coach who literally is texting and talking to his strength and conditioning staff and nutrition staff
Unbelievable.
Daily.
We have always put this energy on keeping athletes safe.
Yeah.
That it's great. I love that they're shoulder pain free. I love that. But what we care about? Hot, dirty, nasty performance, right?
Hot, nasty.
And maybe we get a characteristic or a charismatic coach like Sage who can say, hey, here's the way. But how we prove it? He proves it by letting his athletes be athletes in the pool. How do we take off as many of these factors as we can and just create an opportunity for our athletes to win? Like, if all you have to do is put these women in a position to win, they know how to compete, right? And they get to do that all the time. Everything else is cleared away. This is the new paradigm.
Yeah, this is absolutely the new paradigm. And it's been an absolute pleasure to even be a part of this whole thing, so.
Well, if you ask Georgia where she's going to go to school, she's like, well, I guess I could swim in San Jose State.
Mom's not liking that.
She went to Cal. It's not her fault. We'll see you guys next time.